Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. This one's going to be over something a little different. If you haven't noticed already, we're not really going to be covering a lore subject this time. Instead, what I wanted to do for today is I wanted to show you where I play Warhammer, as there seems to be a growing interest in it thanks to Total War Warhammer, and I'd like to show you guys how I play with the international community. And for those of you who already know Warhammer, you might find this to be just what you were looking for. So when you come to the website, this is going to be the opening screen. So you can just X out of this. You don't have to pay attention to that. And this is what it's going to look like. So you got username, password, and all this stuff. When you come to the website, initially you're going to see a register and a guest mode feature. So I always recommend registering because, as you'll see here, these are the only features you require. It's actually free to register. You can pay, and we'll get to that in a little while, to have access to a couple of really neat features. But to just play like Warhammer, for instance, and have a good time, it's completely 100% totally free. And they don't ever email you. So I've never had an email from Universal Battle besides the time I signed up, so you don't have to worry about them spamming you or anything. So, assuming you register, which you can go in as a guest mode, but I'll talk about why guest mode isn't all that great in just a minute. So we're going to go ahead and sign in. And of course, there is alternative languages up here for those of you who don't have English as your primary language. We have Italian, French, and Spanish, along with English, with a nice little American flag there instead of a British flag. When you log in, typically there will be about three buttons. First, you're going to have your Connect to Lobby, which we'll do in just a moment. You'll have your Edit Custom Army, which we will go over in a future video, which is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to build your own models and stuff like that. And then most of you will probably have a bluish button somewhere in this ballpark where my mouse currently is, that will allow you to purchase a pro membership, which is a one-time purchase of, I think it's $29 now, US dollars, that allows you to have access to all of the website's features. But we'll get more into that later. So let's go ahead and connect to the lobby. Alright, so this is the lobby. It's pretty straightforward. Up here we have everyone who is in the lobby, and it shows what language they speak. This website is frequented mostly by Europeans, so there's a pretty good mix of people who speak all sorts of languages. And then down here is the chat log. So if I type something, it'll show up, and anyone who's in the lobby at the time that I type it will see it. Here's the list of games. Normally it'll be stacked with games and you'll have to scroll left to right to see them all, but right now at the time of recording there's only this one game. So what we could do is, this guy is clearly, based on the name he entered, looking for a game on 9th edition, or 9th Age, excuse me, which is a game semi-based on Warhammer. Well, I guess it's entirely based, but we'll get into that another time. And if I were to click on that, I would go into his map and be able to fight him or talk to him or whatever. But for right now, let's go ahead and just worry about hosting a game. So I'm going to click on that button, and I have two options. I can have an open game or a locked game. A locked game is if you just want to fight someone and you don't want to be bothered, you don't want people coming in to watch, or maybe someone spamming you, so you just want to get away from them, which I've never seen on here before, but I suppose it could happen. We can call the game anything we want, so I could name it after a versus, such as one of my students versus me, or I could do something just like Warhammer 8th edition. That way someone who's in the lobby could see what I'm playing and might come in and fight me if I'm just looking for a game. And then we could do a password. So let's go ahead and put a password so no one's going to come on in here. So this is what happens when you open a map. First thing you're going to see is army selection. Now, for those of you, which is probably going to be most of you, that do not have a pro account, you will only have access to the 9 basic armies. These will suffice for building any army in the game, you'll just have to use substitutes. For instance, if you wanted to use a chariot for, let's say, the Empire, or Beastmen. Beastmen are a good example, because there is no Beastman option. So if you want to run a chariot, you might come into the Undead selection and just use their Undead chariot to represent yours until you get a pro account, and then you have access to every army anyone has ever made on here, which is very nice. Or you can make your own like I have. So let's go ahead and use one of my armies. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over what this map, or what this system can do. But we're going to keep it pretty basic for this video. So first thing, going left to right, is our zoom functionality. So we can zoom in up to quite a number of times, and we can zoom out to get it just right. And if you're wandering around the map, which you can click and drag, and want to get back to the main screen, all you have to do is click this center field button, and boom, it takes us back to the full size of the map. Next, we have the trash button, which allows you to delete anything that you have put on the table. So if my opponent were to put some models on the table, I cannot select them or delete them, but I can select and delete my own guys, like this model. So I'll just throw him in the trash. Next, we have our grid system, which is not used for the games I play, but you might want to use this for something else. I used it once upon a time for a role-playing game I hosted on here. But as you see, it allows you to customize the size of each individual block. That way you can have really large squares or really small squares, depending on the size of your map or the models in question. It allows you to do square shape, brick shape, or hexagons. Also, what it can do is you can have them numbered. So if you're playing a tactical game that requires numbered squares, all you have to do is click that button and it'll do the job for you. Or what we can do is we can even rotate it. So if I play with bricks and it looks like this, but I want it to face the other way, we simply rotate and click and it does it for us. These colors obviously change the color of the text in the back. Ooh, goodness, that's bright. And the X will clear it all away. Next, we have our pin, which in my opinion is one of the more useful functions, which allows us to draw in one of 4 colors all over the map, and we can use it to do useful things like I do in lessons, which is to draw arrows, or circle important units, or show little like tactical gaps, and things of that nature. And the clear pin option will get rid of all of the pin marks regardless of who has made them. Next, we have the dice roller, which is pretty straightforward. The default is the 6-face die, and you can roll any number of die. So I can even roll, let's say, 50 dice. And when I click roll, it'll roll it over here in the chat log, and it organizes it numerically. So all my 1s are grouped together, 2s, 3s, and so on. That way, when you're saying, oh, I need 6s to perform a certain action, you don't have to pick them all out of a random mix. They're all just lined up right there for you. We also have our artillery die and our direction die. And the neat thing about the direction die is not only does it give you the arrow like it would on tabletop, but it gives you the actual degree to the exact digit that you need, which will I'll show you in a little bit, but is very useful. And then, of course, although each of these die are not useful for Warhammer, you might use them for a different tactical game that you decide to play. So we've got our 4-sided die, 8, 10, 12, and 20. Next, we have our tools, which are pretty straightforward. We have templates, such as the ones we use for Warhammer, which are 5-inch, 3-inch, and the flame template. Which the flame template, of course, we use to vomit fire from dragons and such other monsters onto foes. And this 5 template might represent an explosion, and the 3 template is used often for catapults. There's other such templates, such as the foot, which is used exclusively for the Foot of Gork spell, which if you haven't seen used on that Total War Warhammer video of the Karl Franz trailer, you should, because it's a hilarious spell. But this is the template we actually use in tabletop to stomp on people. Then we've got our rulers. So there's a nice 12-inch ruler and a 24-inch ruler. And as I was saying earlier with the direction die, you can actually move these rulers, to that exact degree. So if I fired a catapult shot and it missed by, let's say, due to wind, by 6 inches for the artillery die, and it went 95 degrees off course, all I have to do is put down this template, and then I can move it 6 inches, just like that. And if I want to get really exact about it, I can zoom all the way in to be sure I move exactly 6. So that's really nice. Also in the tool section, we have the always useful line of sight template, which is awesome for Warhammer, as any veteran will know. Then we also have symbols, which you can use to indicate certain important things going on. Or for Warhammer, for instance, I use the skulls to show every wound that a monster has on it. The various tab you can pretty much ignore. The map, which will go into more detail on a later video, allows you to change the size of the map. So these are inches. Warhammer, we play 48 by 72 inches. It allows you to change the generic background, and it allows you to spawn terrain from one of 9 categories. So buildings and forests and later lakes and ruins and walls. But like I said, we'll go more into map functionality on another video. Next is add units, which if you're using a basic account, like I said, you'll only have access to those 9. But since on a pro account, I'm going to use my custom army here. So I'm going to bring out a model I made for one of my students, which is a Tomb King on a chariot. So all I have to do is when I click on the Add Units tab, I have access to everything in the army I've selected. So I can just pick the picture of the model I want. I can say how many I want in the front rank, so how wide the unit is, and I can also show how deep the unit is. And when I make that unit, it shows up all together. And they even show up on a convenient little tray, which I'll zoom in so you can see. There's this little green tab here that highlights when you drag over it. And it allows you to select and drag the entire unit as a whole. And you can even wheel them either direction, which is super nice. Or we can even just plain old rotate them. Or just select them and delete them. For those of you who are more veteran players, you'll know the difference between these block formations and skirmish formations, which is right here. And this is to indicate, for those of you who aren't used to Warhammer, like loose formation units, such as skirmishers and flyers, there's those little gaps there, which is how we indicate those things in tabletop, which it's super useful that already exists within this program. These up-down arrows just change the basic facing of when the unit is deployed. So for instance, when choosing table side, if you end up on the top half, you're probably going to want to use the down arrow. That way you don't have to turn around every single unit to 180 degrees to get them facing the right way. Then finally, down here we have 3 boxes to indicate, that the unit has a musician, which is the music note, standard bearer, which is the banner, or a champion, which is the boss arrow, as they call it. And when I place the unit, no matter how many models I take off, I always have those little 3 indicators there to help remind me and my opponent that that unit has a command structure. Then we'll go into these boxes later. But let's go ahead and talk about the information button. So when I spawn a unit, they will not have anything inherently interesting about them on the information tab. Which if I click on it, it'll show me information about anything else I click on. So if I click on this model, it'll show me all of his information. But I have not entered any information beyond his name, which is up here. So let's go ahead and click on the Add More Info button and type some information. So maybe I'll say that he's fast because he's on a chariot, that he's good against characters due to the way I designed him, weak against fire, and let's say he's my general. And then I can save that information. And now whenever me or my opponent has a question about that model, All we have to do is click on him and open the information tab, and it has all that information that I entered. And so it's really nice for keeping games fast-paced, and you don't have to constantly ask your opponent what items or equipment they've taken on their units or characters. Next is the volume button, which this only controls 2 sounds. There's a little beep sound that goes off when someone comments in the chat, and there's also a sound for rolling dice, which sounds like this, which doesn't seem too bad, and it can alert you to something going on, but quite frankly I find it a little annoying. And then last is the menu button, which if we click on that, it gives us options like changing army. So if I click on that, maybe I want to play a different army, or I want a model to mix and match. So I'm going to move, say, to my High Elf army. And then I click OK. And now when I click Add Unit, I have a completely different selection of models here based on the army I chose. Then we have Save Match, which we'll go into a little bit later. Screenshot, which I think they misspelled as shoot, but whatever. And then Exit Match. And that pretty much does it for what this game functions. There are little things that are offered for pro accounts, such as being able to generate maps that you have saved, so you can create your own maps and be able to summon them up at a moment's notice, just like that, without having to place each individual piece and all that stuff and use other people's maps. Or you can even load the placement of an army that you've made previously. So like I can just get my dwarf army to show up, so I don't have to spend 10-20 minutes building them. Or I can even save a match, and all I have to do is copy this code or save it as a file somewhere in here so that I can finish that map at a later date. So just to quickly show that off, and then we'll probably wrap this up. So I'm going to load the code of a match. Click load. Let's do Tomb Kings versus Empire, which is a match between 2 of my students that's not yet finished. Now I'm going to X out of this because I'm not playing. Give it just a second. It takes a little bit to load. And there we go. We have all the terrain from their fight, as well as where they left their rulers and other symbols to mark wounded units. We see all of their units. You'll notice that things are looking pretty bad for the Tomb Kings this fight. They're a little bit surrounded. And I just want to point out a small difference between a basic and pro army. So the Empire player, who's one of my students, has not purchased a pro account yet. And you'll notice that he has a couple of substitutions. So this Celestial Hurricanum, which is meant to be more of a complicated looking magical Empire unit, is instead a Goblin Wolf Chariot, just to indicate the correct size of the model. And he even named it Hurricane so that we can tell when hovering over it what it is, but he doesn't have like a neat model represented. Or this model is supposed to be Balthazar Gelt, who I did a video on, who's a wizard, but if we zoom in here, that's clearly a knight on a Pegasus. And then finally, these are meant to be Demigryph riders, but he had to use other models to represent them, and so he used ogres on Rhinoxes. However, the Tomb Kings player has a pro account and thus has really nice looking models to represent everything. So everyone is represented as they should be. Tomb Guard look like Tomb Guard, Skeleton Warriors look interesting, so do the Archers. The Casket of Souls is a really interesting looking model. Both his wizards are unique, his Lich Priests, and his Cimmerian War Sphinx is a really neat looking monster on the table. But, like I said, those are all pro features, and we'll talk more about that in a later video. But 2 of my 3 students, 2 of them do not have pro accounts, and they function just great and have an awesome time. So that's pretty much everything we're going to talk about on Universal Battle today. I'll have more videos going into how to build maps and designing custom models and how to borrow or steal, depending on how you view it, models or maps from other players who have uploaded them onto the website for you to use if you're a pro player. So, that pretty much does it for this video, but I do have to make a quick announcement. So the reason I brought up this whole Universal Battle thing is for 2 reasons. First, I am hoping to host a Warhammer tournament online in the near future. For those of you who are interested, whether you be brand new at the game or a longtime veteran like me, and I'm hoping to host it on the Total War Warhammer forums, but I'm still waiting for some kinks to get sorted out and some general mod approval, because I definitely don't want to step on anyone's toes over there at CA. And I think they'll be okay with it, but we'll see. Second, very soon I am going to be opening up my Warhammer school, which is going to essentially be paid lessons to learn how to play the game, to receive materials so that you can build your own armies, to learn how to build your own armies, and how to really enjoy the game of Warhammer. There seems to be a really building interest in learning the game for the upcoming Total War Warhammer video game, especially due to that the more research I do on the game, the more I discover that they are very faithfully bringing in the lore and the rules from the tabletop game into the video game. And for those of you who want a real edge or be able to identify all of the really amazing little Easter eggs in Total War Warhammer, then maybe learning Warhammer is right for you. So far, I'm teaching 3 students. Um, they all 3 are really having a great time and seem to be enjoying themselves. All 3 are from the Total War Warhammer forums. Um, they joined for different reasons. One joined because he wanted to know more about Warhammer in general. One joined just because he seemed to be bored and wanted a tactical challenge. And one joined because he wanted to understand the differences between Total War and Warhammer and see where the video game is going to line up on that. That being said, they all seem to be having a great time, and they fight me quite often, but they fight each other too. So we're kind of building a community, and I hope that you'll consider joining. I'll have a focused video on that very soon this week, as I'm hoping to get out a video per day for the remainder of my time here. So I'm still learning how to do all this, so please be patient with me. That'll pretty much cover it for this video. We'll have another installment in the UB series soon, but tomorrow we'll probably have something more related to my usual lore-based content. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'll speak with you soon. Have a great night.